Hey G fans, GojiFan93 here, and today I'm here to basically do my revisit of the Godzilla Pipeworks Trilogy games. And as you guys know, I love these games, and more than others, but overall, this is like the peak Godzilla gaming period for what I would consider the best Godzilla games out there. So of course, let's start this off by talking about the game that started it, Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee, which is my all-time favorite game in the trilogy. I believe I was in second grade when the game originally released, and I actually remember seeing it at GameStop, and I actually had to save up money to go get it, because back then games were $50, if you guys remember games being that cheap, actually. And I just have the most fondest memories of Destroy All Monsters Melee, bringing it home. And this was on the GameCube, and just playing it. And I remember, struggling a little bit at the beginning, trying to fight Megalon. He would always do his burrow attack, and then he'd end up, always grabbing me, and I didn't have that trick yet to jump and dodge him and all that. But overall, I mean, Melee was just such an amazing game. This game is basically your traditional, fighter 3D fighting game. And first I want to talk about the lack of, kind of story that there is. Really, it's just your generic aliens invade Earth, take control of monsters, and you basically pick the monster you want to play as to defend the world. But what I love about it is the sort of comedic aspect of the characters. And I really love the intro cinematic where you have the Vortak, which is a new alien race that was made up for this game. And I love how there's just this comedic tone to it, and it's so funny, and every time I watch it, I laugh. But again, that's pretty much the story. There's really not much else to it. And then, that leads me into the gameplay, and pretty much talking about the gameplay for this is, this to me, at least in my opinion, was the best out of, all the trilogy. And I don't hear a lot of people say it, but it is. And I feel like a lot of people think that Save the Earth and Unleashed are better, but in terms of gameplay and control, input, and smoothness, of playing it, that this game feels the best to play. If you run it on like the GameCube and Xbox, I am for sure, if you run this on the original hardware, it does run almost at 60 frames per second. It is a smooth, buttery game. And I know for a fact that on the GameCube, it definitely runs really smooth, but on the Xbox as well. And I actually own the whole trilogy. I do own both versions, the GameCube and Xbox version. I do prefer the Xbox version. I think the Xbox version looks better because the Xbox has, bump mapping on the textures, makes things look a little bit more have depth and all that. The character models look a little better too. And also because Kiryu was an exclusive character for the Xbox version. I do know for the GameCube in Japan, Kiryu was actually in the game, but not for the States here. But again, the controls of Destroy All Monsters Melee is just super smooth, really fast paced. And there's really not much I can complain about it. And to be honest, when it comes to Melee, and again, I might be a little biased on this just because of the fact that it was the first Godzilla game I ever played, and it was the first game in this trilogy that I fell in love with. Yeah, I might be a little biased, but again, I think looking at it objectively, I still feel like this was a strong start to the trilogy. And in terms of graphics, of course, I already talked about how good the game looks, and even on the GameCube, it doesn't look too bad. But actually, recently we're playing it for the live stream. I played it on the Xbox emulator and GameCube emulator, and unfortunately, the footage that I captured on the Xbox version, I played it on an Xbox emulator that had some issues where it wouldn't, the textures for the streets wouldn't show up. But switching over to the GameCube, when you if you're playing on the emulator for Dolphin and you upscale the game and you make the textures, it actually looks really freaking good. So Yeah, I think the game holds up in terms of visuals and all that. I really think that the game just looks fantastic. And again, the color the palette, the vibrance of the game, and just the intensity of the combat, I think that it's just amazing. And going back to gameplay in terms, like, this is not just a simplified Godzilla fighter. Like, this game has some depth to it. I mean, it has things that are, you know, really in depth for a combat system for a fighting game. And a lot of the things, I'm not going to go in too depth about the game because I actually, a few years ago on the CJ Cooper's production channel, I did make a Atari Pipeworks Trilogy retrospective, which goes in depth about all these games. And you can actually look at that on this channel as well. It's part of I think it's Godzilla Month 2021 is where I had that video. But yeah, and the game has all these cool different modes too. You got, your standard versus mode, just 1v1. You got your arcade run. You basically pick your monster. You get to go through the, arcade ladder, fighting all the monsters till you get to the final boss, which is Mechagodzilla 2. And then you have survival, destruction mode, team melee. Although one thing on the GameCube, I think that the destruction mode and team melee you can't play without other players, but the Xbox version you can play with CPUs. I do know though that there is a mod out there for the GameCube version that actually enables the melee mode and the destruction mode to be only played single player. But in terms of the games when they first came out, that's kind of what you were stuck with. And again, the game in terms of just, I'm probably going to go in circles with it, but the game is just fantastic. The music is amazing. It's next to Unleashed, it's my favorite. I'd say that this is my second favorite music soundtrack in the trilogy. And again, the sound effects are great. You have a lot of authentic sounds coming from the game as well. And there's just so much of this game that I love, and it's so replayable. The one thing I really love too about it is being able to unlock things. I love the way that this game has you unlock stuff by playing by playing the adventure mode. Every time you beat it, you unlock a new character. And and it also depends on which difficulty. Sometimes I think with like Kiryu and Org on the Xbox version, you have to play like on the hard difficulty or whatever. But I just like how actually playing the game, you just naturally unlock things, and I think that's awesome because you also unlock stages, and then also hidden in the game or hidden in the stages when you destroy a certain building. I think it's on normal difficulty or higher. There's actually an Atari symbol that pops up, and when you grab that, you actually unlock some concept art. And that's really cool in terms of the unlockables. Like the whole gallery item is super cool. You get to see concept of the game, promos, all this cool stuff. And games just don't have that anymore. You just don't see that. And another thing that games don't have anymore is cheat codes. This game has a plethora of cheats and a lot of fun ones too, like black and white mode, Technicolor mode, small mode. There's also buildings that are indestructible, and then buildings that like you can pick up any building, no matter how big it is, and that's just super cool. And then you have like your also your standard ones like invincibility, unlimited energy, all that stuff. But again, guys, you know how I feel about this game. I don't need to go too in depth. And again, I do highly recommend watching my Pipeworks, my Atari Pipeworks retrospective video as well. I go in more depth. But again, yeah, Destroy All Monsters Melee Man, that is, it's just where it's at. To me, it is the quintessential perfect Godzilla game, only to be matched by the upcoming Godzilla Save the Earth Melee, in my opinion. So before I get to Save the Earth, I actually want to talk about Godzilla Domination. And I didn't do a live stream and I didn't really record anything for it, but the footage you're watching is probably from my old Let's Play that I did back in the day. But the reason I didn't really do much with Domination, and this also goes for Double Smash, is the games just don't really do anything for me anymore. They're not that exciting. Domination's not a bad game by far. It's actually one of the best Godzilla games in terms of like a 2D game or a portable. But I just didn't feel like playing it because it does get a little boring and repetitive. But that, again, does not mean the game is bad. In fact, it actually is very good for what it is. The graphics are amazing. The music for it is awesome. The gameplay is fun and addicting. It's just, for me, I just don't really feel like playing it again, But if you haven't played Godzilla Domination, highly recommend you do. With that one out of the way, we now move into Save the Earth, which was the sequel for, Strong Monsters Melee. And this is the game that a lot of people consider to be the best game out of the trilogy. This Save the Earth is hailed as the best Godzilla game in a lot of people's opinions. And I will say that objectively, and probably feature wise and innovations or iterations or whatever, yes, Save the Earth definitely improved on what Destroy All Monsters Melee set out. But this is where you start to see some of the downgrades, in my opinion, and I don't see a lot of people talking. I feel like I'm the only one that talks about that Save the Earth actually was sort of a downgrade to Melee in terms of graphics, in terms of controls, and maybe in terms of some mechanics. I'm not really sure. But the thing I want to start off with is the story. And the story in Save the Earth is, again, it's not that in depth. In fact, it's probably identical to Destroy All Monsters Melee, where you have the Vortac again. They want to, they're invading again. The only thing that this time is that the game actually has really cool FMVs at the intro, and then the beginning of the campaign mode, and then at the end of the campaign mode, if you beat it on hard mode, Space Godzilla is pretty much like the final big villain of the game. That's really cool. And the other thing I like is the fact that depending on what difficulty you play, when you do the adventure mode, it actually is longer depending on the difficulty. So the easy mode, you can finish faster, and you go to hard mode, it actually has more stages to it. And then at the end, you fight Space Godzilla. So that is one cool dynamic thing about it. The one thing I don't like about this game is that the challenges that get infused into the main campaign, and also the fact that they're not skippable. I don't really like that, because a lot of the challenge mode was a welcome addition, but it also is sort of a throwaway gimmick, in my opinion. But I'll get to the challenges later. So the story, again, not too crazy, but I do like the theme and setting. The intro FMVs are amazing, and just the overall, I guess, it was, again, a refinement of what Destroy All Monsters Melee was trying to do. Let me talk about music. Music, again, not my favorite. In fact, Save the Earth probably is my least favorite soundtrack of the trilogy. That's only because the soundtrack, it's not bad, but it just seems to feel a little more down. And I've always struggled to describe how I feel about the soundtrack, or to describe how the soundtrack is. Because I'm not a music major, so I can't really, tell you exactly the inner workings of the music, but it just sounds like more slower, down, grittier, not as high intensity as Destroy All Monsters Melee or what Unleashed would do. So that's really my opinion on that. It's still great, though, don't get me wrong. In terms of the graphics, this is one of the things that I'll talk about, that it was the downgrade. The graphics, to me, the saturation was lowered. The overall texture quality was not as good. Again, even on the Xbox version, the textures still have that bump mapping, but for some reason, the game just doesn't look as good as Destroy All Monsters Melee. And on the PS2 version, wow, it definitely took a nosedive with graphics, and I think that's just because of the hardware. The PS2 just was not, it was probably the least powerful of the 6th generation consoles. Even the GameCube had a little bit more horsepower than the PS2 did. And I don't know why Save the Earth was not on GameCube. I have no idea. So again, the graphics and overall presentation just seemed darker and drearier. And I know that actually was reported that Simon Strange stated that the game, in terms of Save the Earth's development, was a little bit more of a negative one, and I think that reflected on the game, and I think that's why it has more of this darker, drearier tone to it, in terms of like everything about it. The other thing is the gameplay, which is my biggest complaint with Save the Earth, is, again, it feels like a downgrade. The game feels slower. It's more sluggish compared to Melee. I'm not saying that it's not like super slow, but my god, the game chugs sometimes, especially on the PS2. The Xbox version does run better, obviously because of the hardware, but the PS2 version just is not fun to play as or play with. It's just very slow and sluggish. The controls just are not as quick and fluid as they were in Damn. So that's really those negatives that I would say, and that's what I feel holds the game back from being my favorite compared to Damn. The one thing that is great about this game is the fact of the character roster. The character roster was pretty much almost doubled, I'd say, from Damn. And another cool thing I didn't mention when I was talking about damn is the fact that there's no cloned characters. In the first game, Godzilla 90s, Godzilla 2000, Mecha King Ghidorah, King Ghidorah, and then Mecha Godzilla, both of them, they were just cloned characters. They had the same moveset and all that stuff. It was just a different, skin. In Save the Earth, every character has their own unique moveset, their own unique animations, and all that stuff. So that was really nice too. The other thing I forgot to mention actually with Destroy Monsters Melee in terms of the gameplay is I love the fact of power-ups being in the game, and I love the fact of the rage abilities. I love how every character has their own rage move, and to me it's like a fatality, if you so to speak. And they keep that in Save the Earth. They really Save the Earth again. It keeps everything that Destroy Monsters Melee did, but it just iterates on it, whether it's good or bad. It doesn't necessarily take anything away. One thing that I will say that Save the Earth does take away is the way that you unlock things. And I feel like this game it's not fun to unlock things in this game because everything is now through a credit system. So basically anything you do in the game, you just earn credits. And then those credits are used to unlock characters, arenas, gallery items, all that stuff. And it just feels less natural and authentic to me. Because then at that point, it just feels like a grindy game. You're just repeating the same modes so that you can, grind up to get points to unlock a certain character or whatnot. That's really the only down thing I would say. The other thing that's not as great is that there's not as many cheat codes. This game does have cheats, but they're mainly generic cheats. You got invincibility, unlimited energy, unlock all things, like a master code, all that. But it doesn't have any of the fun cheats. It doesn't have Technicolor, black and white, small monsters, all buildings being able to pick up, or indestructible buildings, things like that. It doesn't, I don't know why they just didn't bring those cheat codes back into the game. It was kind of weird. So again, you can see why I look at both games and I say that Save the Earth was a bit of a downgrade, even though in a lot of ways Save the Earth was an improvement, but to me, there's just a lot more things that were not as good. So that's just why I prefer Melee over Save the Earth. But again, Save the Earth is still a fantastic game. Not saying that it's bad at all. And the fact that it was the 50th anniversary game, it was, especially in the concept, they had Final Wars concept arts, which was really cool to look at. But that was really, my main thing with this game. But it's still a fun time. You still got all the fun modes too. You got Versus, you got Destruction Team, Melee, all that good stuff. But the challenge modes, that's probably the biggest addition to this game. And the challenge modes are hit or miss. Some of the challenges are fun. Others can be mind-numbingly awful. Probably my least favorite challenge mode is the one where you have to throw monsters into 3 zones. I hate that one because it's blech. One of my favorites is probably the like Star Fox-esque missions, like the rail shooter ones where you play as Mogira in Godzilla 2000. Those ones are probably my favorite. And then one that is just asinine is the Orga challenge at the end. That one I hate so much. Like, that one is so hard. I've never been able to beat it. And if you have, then congrats. Kudos to you. You're a master at this game. So yeah, the other thing that this game did that I can think of is the arenas. Melee had a wide variety of arenas to fight in, but they also had like subsections of those arenas. You'd have like San Francisco, but then San Francisco East or North. Well, in Save the Earth, they just didn't have that. They just have the arenas and that's it, which I kind of prefer. It was a little more bloated in Melee in terms of that, but yeah, Save the Earth, it's not a bad game. I just prefer Melee a little bit more just because of the controls and all that. To me, it's just a slight downgrade to Melee. So with that leads us into the final game of the trilogy, and probably the most infamous one, is Unleashed. And I'm just going to really quickly touch upon Double Smash. Again, like I said with Domination, I had no interest in revisiting Double Smash because I hate that game. I think back in the day, I actually used to like it, but after playing it, I think a few years ago, I did a live stream on the CJ Cooper's Productions channel, and trying to play Double Smash now, I was like, this is it's a horrible game. It's not good. So I very much dislike Double Smash, just for the gameplay alone. The art style I wasn't a fan of, but I give it a pass because it was on a handheld. They had to do some kind of stylized graphics for it. But the gameplay is just mind-numbing. It's just side-scroller. You get hit all the time. There's bullets flying everywhere. And the bosses are just annoying to fight. And then the stupid crystal thing, when a crystal pops up, you have to put in those buttons, and you'd have to put that combination perfectly timed, otherwise you'd mess up, and it was just horrible. So going on to Unleashed, yeah, you guys know I'm not a fan of Unleashed. I've had a very contentious relationship with this game ever since it came out back in 2007. I was in middle school when this game came out, and I followed this game so much online when they had, if you guys remember, they had that GodzillaUnleashed.com, like they had the website where you could look at the different characters that they would reveal, and you'd have like cards and information, and I would look at that site every day. And I remember seeing a video from IGN that was basically like the first look of the game, and it looked so cool, like it really looked awesome, and I was so ready for it. And I remember the first time I played the game, I actually didn't buy it. I actually rented it from Gamefly. If you guys remember Gamefly, I don't even know if Gamefly is still around, but that was my first exposure to it on the Wii. And I gotta say, it was disappointing. I was very disappointed in the game on the sole fact of the controls. And again, I have said this so many times, I feel like a broken record. Unleashed is my least favorite in the trilogy because of the controls. The controls are the one thing that ruined the whole experience for me. If it was not on the Wii, if it was on the 360 or PS3, and it had the same framework as Damn and Save the Earth, it would have been leagues better. In fact, Unleashed would have probably been my favorite Godzilla game, but no, that wasn't the case. And a lot of, certain design choices that were different compared to the previous two games. You had your life bar, which now was divided up into cells, and you had to take down each cell in order to take out the monster, and you had to do a special move to KO the monster. You couldn't just do a simple, like slap, right, or a tail attack. You had to do like do the motion control and do a special move to then be able to KO the character. And I just didn't like that. The one thing I did like, though, was being able to recharge your energy automatically. That was a nice addition. But that didn't help it. The other thing that this game had was its ambition in terms of the campaign. The campaign probably had the most in-depth work on it compared to the previous two. It actually had a story. It had a cast of characters. But unfortunately, due to time restraints, resources, budgetary reasons, I'm not really sure exactly, the campaign just fell short. There was so much to be desired with that campaign. There was supposed to be major branching paths. There were supposed to be all these randomized encounters. The way that Simon Strange described this game during its production sounded really ambitious, but the final product was just, okay, yeah, you have these random monsters that appear, but it's not like in this really cool dynamic way. They just kind of pop in out of nowhere, and then the branching paths are it's very shallow. You just either pick one stage or the other, and that's it. And then you can decide if you want to be a good guy or bad guy, but it doesn't really make an effect on the game overall. So that was also a disappointment. And the cutscenes are just these flat artwork 2D images, and it doesn't really do much for me. And the characters themselves are not memorable at all. So again, that could have been worked on more and probably better. But so I mean, at least they tried to make the story a little bit more engaging, having Space Godzilla again being the main bad guy, the Vortak are trying to do a thing, and I like the addition of factions. I think having the monsters in different teams was a good idea. You had the Earth Defenders, the aliens, the mutants, and then the GDF. I thought that was a good change to it. And also the fact that the characters had different personalities, I feel was welcomed. Now, also to say, I played this this time when I revisited the game for my live stream. I played Unleashed on the Unleashed or Final Wars Overhaul mod, and the mod was aimed to have the game run better with a controller instead of having to use motion controls. But I gotta say, guys, whether it's my incompetence of not being able to figure out how to make the game work with the controls or whatever, it still, to me, does not play well at all. Even with the being able to use my Xbox controller, it just did not run well whatsoever. So I kind of stopped playing that one, and then I moved to the PS2 version. And the PS2 version is one of the most contentious things with Unleashed, and sort of one of the most bizarre things. I also know that the game was supposed to be on the PSP as well. I don't know how they would have pulled that off, but they decided to put it on the PS2, probably because they already had an established, fan base on that console. And unfortunately, the PS2 was just Oh, it was such a worse version of Save the Earth. It was literally the Save the Earth game, just with the Unleashed templates and graphics and all that. But man, the textures were awful. The gameplay was sluggish, and the audio was horrible. And the audio was bad actually in the Wii version too. Sometimes you'd have repeating sound effects that would just make my ears bleed. But overall, it just not that great. But for my live stream, I played the PS2 version, and I've always favored the PS2 version only because I can actually play it. The controls are playable, right? Like you can actually do that. And actually on the PS2 emulator, it actually ran pretty smooth, just with the power of the PC behind it. So, again, to me, if you watch my live stream of Unleashed, when I revisited it, when I played it again, I go, I talk with people about the disappointment of the game. I go in more depth about it. But it's just a sad thing. It's really sad to see how the Pipeworks trilogy just sort of, as the games progressed, there were little downgrades and things that sort of cut its own feet off. It didn't have anything left when Unleashed came out. It also didn't help the fact that the PS2 version released before the Wii version, so it gave people a horrible impression on the game overall. I don't know why that was a decision that was made. So that was kind of Unleashed is just not my favorite, and I understand that there are a lot of people that have fond memories for Unleashed, but I'm just not one of them. I just wasn't part of that generation, I guess. I also just didn't favor the Wii at all as a console. So a lot just wasn't going for Unleashed in my eyes. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts, guys. That's my revisit with the Pipeworks trilogy. That's pretty much it in terms of these games. I'm gonna lay this to rest, and the next time I revisit or come back to this series of games will be when Godzilla Save the Earth Melee comes out, and I cannot wait. But as far as the original games, I have a lot of memories with them. The Atari Pipeworks trilogy, even though I have my problems with these games are always going to be special to me, very, very much so. And that's why the Save the Earth Melee project is actually another very special thing to me, because these games are like unbelievably, they are childhood to me. And yeah, I can keep on coming back to them, even Unleashed. Maybe, I don't know, but so these games were a good time, and I really hope that Save the Earth Melee can get some updates soon, so we can see, maybe another playable beta or something. I can't wait. But so that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of the Godzilla Atari Pipeworks trilogy. I can't wait to read all your comments and thoughts, and that's it. So as always, stay big, G fans.